Okay, good afternoon to everybody. I am Paolo Naso. I teach and work here in Rome, so I'm very pleased to welcome you all. I hope you enjoyed the Italian risotto. It was a very typical Italian risotto, but more than that, I hope you had a good coffee because this time of the day is the most dangerous for a panel like this. So I do hope that you have a strong Italian coffee, not a cappuccino. Uh, we are invited in this panel to explore the connection between peace, justice, and strong institutions. Before entering into the theme and introducing it for your benefits, let me quote Martin Luther King. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects on one directly affects all indirectly. The leader of the civil rights movement wrote this passage when he was in jail in Birmingham, Alabama. And he was imprisoned in Birmingham while he was preparing a mass action to protest against the segregation of the black people and for the right of vote of the black people. The phrase that I want to stress and to use as a sort of opening consideration for this presentation is the following. We are tied in a single garment of destiny. This was very true in the 60s. I think that it is even more true today. Globalization ties us in a single garment of destiny. And when we consider the three elements that we are supposed to explore in this panel, peace, justice, and strong institution, I think that we have to adopt this global overview of the three elements. Let's start with peace, and I refer to some analysis offering the picture of the conflicts and of the wars today. The analysts, mainly geopolitical scholars, make a distinction between three categories of conflict. The first category is what they call major wars. It means wars or conflict that produce more than 10,000 casualties, dead people in 1 year, being the present year or the last year. We have three of these major conflicts nowadays. A second category is the category of what they call the wars, not major wars, but wars. And these are conflicts producing for a year between 1,000 and 10,000 victims. These wars are 70. Finally, the third category is the category of the minor conflicts, to adopt their terminology, producing victims between 100 and 1,000. The minor conflicts are 21. So we have in front of us nowadays not only a major conflict in Ukraine, as everybody knows, but more than that, we have 41 other conflicts with a variety of intensity. There is no peace. There is no peace. And these remind us some words of the prophet Jeremiah. Peace, peace, they say, when there is no peace. And this is very evident in consideration of the rhetoric we adopt. We are in conflict because of the invasion of Russia, of the Ukraine, the Free State. This is true, but before that, there were more than 40 other conflicts with thousands and thousands of meetings. In many, let's go to the second word, that is justice. In many vast regions of the global south, development processes started decades ago, stopped, and forced people to move. This brings to a central point of this panel, and allow me to focus on the consequence of this problem, global migration. In an old-fashioned interpretation, we tend to make a clear distinction between two kinds of migrants: economic migrants from one side and asylum seekers or refugees from the other side. According to traditional definitions, the first, economic migrants, are those who leave their countries pushed by economic scarcity, pervasive poverty, desertification, deprivation, and lack of natural resources. The second, namely asylum seekers or refugees, are forced to leave their countries because they are persecuted and discriminated on the basis of their political, religious, or sexual orientation. This dual categorization, elaborated after World War II in the years of the Cold War, today appears obsolete and inadequate to represent the current situation. Many so-called economic migrants are de facto refugees because they escape from persecution and discrimination due to their ideological, political, religious, sexual orientation, such as more and more often what we call asylum seekers are de facto economic migrants because they escape from misery and poverty as well. Unfortunately, national and global policies don't recognize this important news and tend to keep a wall of distinction between categories of people both in need and support of international protection. More than that, we produce a sort of moral differentiation. In the current political dispute, there is the idea that we are forced, because of the international law, to welcome the refugee. But we don't have any duty, so to say, to the economic refugee. And sometimes economic refugees or economic migrants becomes an expression to say a clandestine person trying to alterate the economic dynamics of our country. This incapacity to understand the new dynamics of global migration matches with a big change in the migration situation. Historically, migrations have been the combined results of push and pulling factors. The first, push factors, tend to expel people from regions of poverty and persecution. The second, the so-called pulling factors, aim to attract workers in the most affluent regions. The balance of this mechanism between push and pull factors today is very fragile and precarious. We still register labor demand, but much more temporary and subaltern than in the past. The idea to migrate to better personal economic condition is often a dream. Technophobic campaigns and negative narratives are the consequences of this dramatic change, especially when some political parties try to capitalize the sense of fear and risk perceived by many nationals. But this perception contrasts the evidence of the fact. Affluent societies need migrants, but they want to keep them at the bottom of the social scale and pretend flexible, temporary, and selective migration. Migrations become variables of economic interest. But migrations are composed by migrants, men, women, children, human beings with their stories, fears, hopes, projects. In a merely economic approach to this global phenomenon, affluent societies dehumanize this process and neglect the moral tragedy of what is happening, for instance, in the Mediterranean Sea. According to many international agencies, in about 10 years, we registered not less than 30 deaths of migrants trying to cross 30,000 deaths, 30,000 deaths of migrants trying to cross the sea and land in a safe country of Europe, mainly Italy, Spain, Greece, Malta. 30,000 victims. The same numbers of what we called wars a few minutes ago. 30,000 victims in a small portion of sea is a terrible price to the European policies on migration. In fact, these casualties are related to the fact that, with few exceptions, there are no legal ways to migrate in Europe. And in absence of real alternatives, the illegal and risky human trafficking becomes the most viable way to migrate. This has been a challenge for many expressions of the communities of faith and of the civil society in Europe. And I want to remind that it was an expression of this reaction of the civil society, the fact that since 2017, Italy, France, Belgium, and Germany adopted the good practice of the humanitarian corridor. It was not an initiative started by the government, not by the European Union, it started by the church. And I am pleased to say by the ecumenical churches, because it was an initiative in Italy started by Protestant denomination, Caritas, the community of Sant'Egidio, and other Catholic associations. So the churches, the believers acted before and more effectively of the state. This has been an incredible ecumenical venture that is often quoted and awarded by international agencies. But this is what we call a good practice. It's not a policy. It's nice to say that 6,000 people have been rescued, have been avoided the tragedy of the traffickers, of the crossing the Mediterranean, but the number is just symbolic. How to transform, to develop the good practice in a real policy. This is the challenge of the community of faith who started the humanitarian corridor 6 years ago. But more than that, and after a safe passage, we needed to grant real processes of integration, because we are aware that the people arriving to our countries are entitled to basic human rights, are entitled dignity, and have to be supported and accompanied in a process of integration. Religion and the full respect of their religious identities and their religious belonging is an essential part of this strategy. Unfortunately, some European governments try to adopt sectarian policy. We want the Christians. We don't want the Muslims. We want the white. We don't want the blacks. We don't want the brown. This is tragic for the spirit of Europe, for the sense of freedom of Europe. So we arrive to the point of the strong institution. I will let to other colleagues who will follow me the definition of strong institution. But what I can say at the beginning of the panel is that I don't see any strength in the institution. Sometimes I think we have to put more faith in the civil society and in the action and in the creativity of the religious body. So, no peace, no justice, no strong institution. This is the pessimistic declination, organization of my presentation. But I want to close with a word of hope and a word of vision. And let me close with a quotation, very recent quotation by Pope Francis. He adopts the metaphors of the bridge. We have to be bridge maker in a time of walls. We are called to show, I quote, maximum respect for the dignity of each migrant. This entails accompanying and managing waves of migration as best we can, constructing bridges and not walls, expanding channels for a safe and regular migration in whatever place we decide to build our future. In the country of our birth or elsewhere, the important thing is that there always be a community ready to welcome, protect, promote, and integrate everyone. Thank you.